Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And last time we talked a lot about some new mysteries that have come up where the remains were found of an amputated limb and from 30,000 years ago, and how this had to have been done with surgical instruments. And Kris was telling us about how this brings up questions and different that move us into growth and into growth opportunities and how we could use these questions. So Kris is back here with us and hoping we can build on some of that.
Indeed. The race, the human race, of course, has been on this particular world for a very, very long time, far longer than your sciences are willing to suggest. And they do like a certain kind of order, a very precise order that they can bank on. And you can take that whichever way you want, because it gives a certain reassurance that everything has a very precise evolution according to nature as they understand it. But they do come across various anomalies. Sometimes it is beyond their capacity to understand. There have been many reports of discoveries gently, quietly taken away, never to be questioned or brought to the public eye again, because its exploration would, again, upset the established order as it is perceived. Another interesting observation in that similar line is looking at ancient civilizations: Mayan, Aztec, Babylonian, Assyrian, Akkadian, Mesopotamian, Indian, and many others. And look at the depictions of carvings and statues, supposedly depicting ancient gods, winged gods, animal-headed gods, multi-armed gods and goddesses as well, that seem to present an aura of strength, wisdom, power. These are usually ascribed to little more than some kind of a religious purpose or function. And yet, so many ancient cultures have very similar depictions around the world. If these various cultures were isolated, then how to explain that there are so many similarities in the way these beings are carved, as well as the temples and the structures within which either they inhabit or is next to them or whatever else may be presented. How is it that there are so many similarities? And we do not want to get into the notion of ancient aliens in that particular way as it is depicted on television series. But we do want to point out that your species, even in antiquity, was far more intelligent than what is assumed. They had great developments. Some of their civilizations were completely eradicated by natural cataclysms of one kind or another. Entire civilizations gone, either through earthquakes, massive or mega tsunamis, so many other situations, volcanic eruptions. How many other Pompeiis are there around the world? There are quite a lot of them. There have been numerous volcanic eruptions, even into extreme antiquity, as you call it. Entire groups, entire nations just swiped away. Their developments, knowledge of them, completely gone. If the discoveries about Pompeii had not been made, you would not know what happened. You would not even know. There are other parts of the world where the very same thing has occurred. Your ancestors in this way had very evolved principles, developments, discoveries, scientific in their own ways, some that might even rival some of the developments you have today, and not necessarily in terms of gas or gasoline, fossil fuels, and so on, but in other kinds of developments. The developments that your present society has followed is unique in that respect, though other sources of fuel were utilized in other ways in your past. The electric car is not new. That technology, that science has existed for well over 100 years in your world. It did not seem to be profitable at the time when fossil fuels were starting to be pushed onto the public. So it was literally relegated to the back burner. So now there is a resurgence of this technology. Other similar technologies in your ancient past have also gone through certain cycles. Certain things seemed more viable than others, and this was promoted only to come back. Certain ways of living were promoted only to come back. Later on, under another guise. So there is always a give and take for your species to experiment with the probable developments of your own creativity. Creativity, desire, cannot ever be suppressed for very, very long at your own peril. And when it is suppressed in one area, then the universe finds a way to bring it back, sometimes slightly differently, still just as effective, so that all kinds of probable developments can be encouraged, can be followed, because what is discovered today may indeed lead the way to another fantastic discovery in the future, built upon it, which can build upon that, which can build upon that. So there are many, many different ways to engage creativity. And the interesting part is that subconsciously, your species is still attuned not only to its so-called ancient past, what is referred to as racial memories. Racial memories are not limited to the past. Racial memories can also flow into what you call the future, and not necessarily in a linear line of development, but more so in an spiral kind of development. As strange as the word may sound in this context, because you need to experiment as a species with all possible developments, all probabilities, because you can never necessarily be complacent. A individual, a society, a culture, a civilization that remains complacent eventually is atrophied and is lost to the annals of time. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So looking back in terms of these ancient carvings, whether on walls in temples or other places, literally from all around the world, is a way to remember and connection to your racial memories, not just from the past, but also from the future. And by that we mean that there are many temple carvings in ancient India that would lead one to actually wonder how carvings, often in granite, can depict items that seem to be found in your modern world. And it is not a coincidence, because all of these materials, the statues, the carvings, the temples themselves, are landmarks, they are psychological and psychic landmarks to encourage the individual who perceives them to discover their own truths about reality, that reality is not necessarily locked in linear fashion, but in a different way, that there are other possibilities open to it. And in terms of what we called racial memories, what you call racial memories, in specifics about your ancient past, you remember those ancient cultures, even if it is entirely unconsciously. There is still an echo down those corridors of time, if you like. You still speak with those ancestors, those ancestral lines of human beings. But that is not necessarily something that you would tap into quite consciously unless you were very specifically trained. And we are not talking about the classic Akashic records. This is living energy of beings that experienced many kinds of developments that are still part of the psychic and psychological makeup that you can perceive unconsciously. A specific training for dream recall can definitely bring back mental snapshots of those excursions, those hikes into those memories. Someone who is specifically trained in astral travel or lucid dreaming even can direct their consciousness well beyond the confines of time and space as you understand them, and actually visit those ancient psychic landscapes, which might also bring insights as to why certain groups of humans may have particular types of reactions to certain situations. There may have been humans who had experiences with natural cataclysms, such as meteorites causing devastation. This is imprinted, embedded into those ancient memory patterns. So there are similar kinds of excursions that can be taken into the so-called future of your race to examine the possible adventures that await you, that beckon you. And for all intents and purposes, if anything beckons you, it is not the past, but it is the future. The future beckons you to discover more about yourself, your capabilities, and everything that you can do. And that is partly why you create situations like this being with an amputation, why you create temples and carvings and statues that appear to be from the past with depictions of human animal components, because you are also trying to reconcile or to bridge the gap between the past, the present, and the future. Because most of these memories are not just echoes of the past, but they are also echoes of the future. The echo beckons you, and you need to translate it. You need to translate it in terms that you know. And for now, your species is more convinced into the validity of your past than your future. Even though you have high aspirations for your future, you still consider it rather risky. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, and I know a lot of people believe in the end of the world or some sort of, an ending to the civilization, or that it's inevitable. I just find that interesting. It seems to be a popular belief.
Indeed. Even the inhabitants of Pompeii would not necessarily have expected that the world would have ended, but it left an imprint onto the collective psyche. Different cultures and civilizations that perished in those ways also would have left an imprint. But they are also a way to understand that, first of all, even though there might be certain cataclysms in your future, it is not the end of your race. Even though it is predicted that in a few billion years from now, your sun will go nova and your planet will be incinerated. appears to be a scientifically viable possibility. But what if it isn't? What if you continue? What if existence still continues? What if it still flourishes well beyond anything that you can imagine? And this does not necessarily mean, of course, we will exist. We will now be cultivating and terraforming other worlds, other planets, and other solar systems. But even this particular world, and if truth be known, this particular world is not the first one. This is not the first planet, nor the first solar system that exists in this particular location, if you like. Your species is creative. Your species also is basically energy. And whether you recognize it or not, you create. That includes your perceptions of your world, your solar system, your galaxy, your universe. And simultaneously, in terms of consciousness, your world and everything about it simultaneously exists and does not exist. And yet, here you are. So we will suggest to either end this particular discussion unless you have a particular observation or inquiry. Please feel free.
Well, I just find I'm just trying to process the idea of there being other planets or other, and maybe I'm understanding them just as other dimensions of self, perhaps. But if there have been other explorations in this area or the solar system, that's just intriguing.
Indeed. And yes, to your inquiry, there are other probable developments, and yet these probable developments are as real as anything you understand to be real at this point in time. And these all exist simultaneously. Consider for a moment, when you watch television, you are on a channel watching one show. You know almost absolutely that, of course, just because you are watching the one channel does not mean that there is no other channel. There are hundreds and hundreds of different channels. You're simply tuned into one. If you have picture in picture, you may be able to watch 2 or perhaps 3 stations simultaneously. But imagine a television screen that may be dozens of feet wide and high, having television and television capabilities. And every square foot of that screen has a different show all at once, playing on that one screen. So in a particular way, for the sake of this poor analogy, probabilities exist in a very similar fashion. You are just tuned into one channel. With training, you can attune yourself to more than just the one. You can expand your awareness to incorporate a few others, but you are not sufficiently developed, egoically and otherwise, to be able to accommodate every single channel that is being played. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, I follow you.
So all that to say that the world is a endless stream of possibilities, and even more than that, the world is an endless stream of potential, and potential is born out of love. Because you love to create. If that were not the case, then you would not bother. There would be no world that you know of. There would be nothing. So, because you love to create, then you do as you love. And with that, we thank you for your consideration, and we return Joseph to your lovely creations.
All right, thanks, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.